Maverick Physical Therapy back for episode 2 of Transformational Zone 1A of throwing and pitching mechanics. What I'm going to be taking you through here are some things that I've used that have been quite successful in working with that pitching athlete, that more specifically, and also that throwing athlete. But we're going to go through some sequencing and some hot topics of things, looking at the quarterback, looking at the infielder and the outfielder a little bit more specifically, and all kind of the weird and the funky positions that they get into as well. So don't feel excluded on that. So Transformational Zone 1A, pitching mechanics. Guys, what we have here, whether we're coming from the wind net or whether we're coming from the set position, we're going to use this little dowel right here. And regardless of either of those scenarios, we need to get into the same position before we transition to home plate. Transformational zones, again, are our areas to treat and to assess because of the biomechanical principles that enable us to move load to explode. We need to be able to three-dimensionally use those little proprioceptors to turn on the system through loading and through stabilization before we can move. Movement is a direct response to how we load. I'm going to take you through right now kind of a handful of things that just kind of off the bat that I like to use for my throwing athletes, my pitching athletes. Some things to be very well aware of first is the right foot and ankle. Let's say for the right throwing athlete, you're a lot of times going to see a hip and you're going to see a foot and an ankle that bail on out. A lot of different things biomechanically going on there that can be very intricately kind of complex. So we're not going to cover a ton of that today, but I'm going to tell you a little bit in regards to some things to kind of look at and to kind of check out to help us kind of recorrect that a little bit. So if you're getting that and if you're seeing that, you've got an athlete that's not willing to kind of subconsciously, consciously load that foot and an ankle, load the butt and the hip, whether it's from an issue stemming from the bottom up, from the left side even, or the right side, and or the top down with the glove side arm and the throwing arm. Glove side arm, as we talked about a minute ago, has a huge role in playing in this game of kind of loading this throwing athlete. I'm not here to change your mind in regards to pitching mechanics, to promote some way as a doctor in physical therapy of to throw a ball, but simply put, there's foundational principles biomechanically that need to occur for you to throw a baseball consistently and efficiently well, point blank. It's got to happen. It has to happen. So what I'll do first, I'm going to have you get a bat, I'm going to have you get a dowel or a PVC pipe, and some things that I'll start with doing. You can also use a fence or a gate. In a second, we'll use some of this kind of fencing behind me right here. But some things that I like to do, I like to get this and set this here so that I can, with the glove side arm, kind of over accentuate from the top down my load to the right hip and the right kind of foot and ankle right here. And the right foot and ankle. If you have a gate or kind of fencing to kind of work with, you can also kind of hold on to that. I'll also like to kind of block my foot, my right foot, with something as well sometimes. Give it something firm right here. I've got a post in my backyard that I can use to prevent that whole entire foot from kind of bailing out on me. So I use the left upper extremity as a driver to kind of load that right hip. I can go kind of side to side a little bit with it. So I will kind of, to get this adduction kind of load at that right hip, kind of really going before I get into TZ1B and transition into some abduction of that right hip. I'll kind of take a little frontal plane, a left lateral lunge, kind of a little bit, just a nice little step to a nice kind of load. I'll also, right here, let me open up so you can see me a little bit more in so I don't step off the platform. I can also add a 135-degree angle load here, kind of a rotation and a step around. 135, to a step around to transverse plane wise with the dowel right here, so you can get a better shot of that. I'm going to step out at 135 and just a little step across here, and I'm going to use that top down driver of the glove to kind of load that right foot and ankle. My objective is to keep the toes and the heel pointed at you. You're going to get a lot of good kind of rotation and kind of twisting right here. That's what we want. Again, we talked about in episode 1 how pivotal that internal rotation, that relative internal rotation of the right hip is. So we're going to get things going momentum wise and teeter totter wise. I love the teeter totter. A left kind of posterior lateral kind of lunge with a little step over and a step across right here and here. I can go a little frontal plane now. So I can go kind of a left lateral lunge to here to a medial lunge, and I can take my upper extremity here and just give me a good kind of top down load. And sometimes I'll go with either the left foot pointed forward, which will really help load that adduction, as well as the inversion down at the foot and the ankle. I'll also, with that medial lunge, add the rotation of the left lower extremity to give me a little more internal rotation, as well as kind of that adduction at the hip into that that rotational kind of element, as well as going to give us that right rotation of the tibia and the fibula, which is going to help in combination with the inversion of the calcaneus really go after giving us that relative adduction at that subtalar joint and that great adduction of the mid-tarsal joint as well. I'll also, with these guys, so dowel wise, it just gives me a little guidance, it gives me a little support to kind of load a little bit more, and then to stabilize a little bit more as well, kind of time under tension. What I'll also do here is kind of add a little step back and a little step forward, a little step back and a little step forward with a good kind of in sync upper extremity driver while I'm keeping that right foot nice and planted so that I can start to get a little kind of extension here. I can go with a little kind of reach overhead too. That's going to help kind of trigger and get some kind of posterior rotation and some relative extension, or getting some the right hip to go into, again, that extension, which is what we want to kind of teeter-totter through, and TZ1A, a little of that posterior kind of tilt of the pelvis. We can do that with an anterior medial kind of crossover as well. And then back to kind of our medial lunge right there with kind of this reverse kind of wood chop almost of the glove side arm as we're getting some support. And then I'll just go straight on back to the good old dowel with the glove side arm. It's pretty simple. Grab a fence.